I'm Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, and this is the Autoimmune Protocol Lecture Series, Week 2, Lecture 3, The Importance of Seafood. When we looked at nutrients that were important in the immune system, we saw that one of the frequent flyer foods that came up again and again and again as a really important source of those nutrients was seafood, fish, shellfish, and sea vegetables. And it's because seafood is some of the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. A lot of us don't necessarily like fish. It doesn't have quite the gross factor of organ meat or consuming insects, for example. But a lot of people really feel squeamish about consuming something like oysters, shellfish. And I think it's really important to emphasize that there are nutrients that we get from seafood that are very difficult to get in sufficient quantities from other foods. So it's a really important thing to start evaluating how you might be able to fit seafood more into your diet. Fish is one of the most digestible proteins. It's a complete protein. It is full of healthy fats. It is our best source of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA, which are so fundamental for not just immune health, but for cardiovascular health and mental health, for the health of the gut microbiota. Fish is also really high in some really important amino acids that are important for immune function, like alanine and arginine, glycine. They're a great source of creatine, which has a variety of health benefits associated with it. They're super high in every B vitamin, even including choline. They're high in iodine and iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, sulfur. They're high in ubiquinol, which is a very important chemical from a cardiovascular health perspective. It's sort of a vitamin-like chemical. They're high in zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin E. You'll recognize that a lot of those are really essential immune health nutrients. Shellfish rivals organ meat in terms of its nutrient density. In addition to being, again, a really digestible, complete protein and full of those long-chain omega-3 fats and lots of amino acids that are really important for immune health, like alanine, arginine, glycine. Shellfish can be some of our best sources of some really important minerals. They're great sources of calcium, cobalt, copper, chromium, iodine, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, sulfur, and zinc, and including dozens of trace minerals that we might not be getting enough of, really sticking with just land animals as our animal foods. They're also high in vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D. We really get a tremendous amount of nutrients from shellfish. And different shellfish has different nutrients. So even if you compare oysters and clams, which are highly related, right? They're both bivalves. They're very, very similar shellfish. They have quite different nutrition. So oysters are probably our top food source of zinc. 100-gram serving of oysters has 605% of the RDA of zinc. If you look at clams, the same amount of serving only has 18%. But that 100-gram serving of clams has 1,648% of the RDA for vitamin B12. Oysters only have a measly 324%. So mixing up shellfish becomes a really important way, just like mixing up vegetables is an important way of mixing up the nutrients we're getting, mixing up shellfish, mixing up fish, that becomes a really good way of changing the nutrients that we're getting and really ensuring that we're getting the full complement of essential nutrients that our bodies need. Sea vegetables are a really interesting vegetable. They're quite different from vegetables and fruit that are grown on land, which is why I'm talking about them in the context of seafood. So they're high in a lot of the same types of vitamins and minerals, right? B vitamins, vitamin C, E, and K, calcium, chromium, copper, iodine, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, selenium, zinc. They also have a long-chain fatty acid, DHA. and they are the only plant food that has long-chain fatty acids. And they also contain dozens of additional trace minerals. I mean, sometimes, 50, 60, 80 different trace minerals. So a lot of these minerals that we don't even completely understand the role that they have in human health, but we know that deficiency might be a contributor to chronic disease. Consuming shellfish, consuming sea vegetables, consuming a mineral-rich unrefined sea salt like Himalayan pink salt or a sea vegetable salt where you get to combine those things. These can be really great ways to ensure that we're getting these trace minerals and making sure that our body has not just all of the nutrients that we've identified as essential, but all of the nutrients it actually needs, even the ones we don't really understand yet. Sea vegetables have some other really interesting compounds in them, these phytochemicals in sea vegetables that are uniquely beneficial. So one is called fucoxanthin. This is a type of carotenoid, and it gives seaweed its brown pigments, and it has some really strong anti-cancer properties. It's also been shown to be beneficial in reducing liver fat, so that can be very, very helpful for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it has the potential to boost the metabolic rate and aid in fat loss. So it's got some really interesting properties. Fucoidins and laminarins are sulfated polysaccharides, so kind of a type of fiber, that have been shown to induce cell death in certain types of cancer. So it has, again, these really potent anti-cancer properties, but they also have antiviral properties and neuroprotective properties. They can help slow blood clotting and are definitely important immune modulators. And alginates are cell walls that are constituents in brown algae, and these may aid in weight loss, in glycemic control, and in appetite regulation. So there's some really interesting phytochemicals in sea vegetables that we're not getting anywhere else. Now, you hear about fish and you hear about shellfish, you hear about sea vegetables, and a lot of the most common questions are, well, what about toxins? What about heavy metals? What about mercury? So let's start with mercury. Methylmercury is an organic form of the heavy metal mercury, and this is the predominant form that's found in fish. It's concentrated in the muscle of fish because it binds so tightly to certain proteins in fish, and it accumulates over time. This, by the way, is why buying a low mercury fish oil is completely pointless because there's no mercury in the oil to begin with. Mercury is susceptible to biomagnification. So that means that the higher up the food chain, the higher the mercury levels. So fish that eat plankton tend to have very, very low levels of mercury. Fish that eat other fish tend to have much higher levels of mercury. And the reason why this is an issue is because methylmercury is almost completely absorbed in our gastrointestinal tract and distributed throughout our bodies. Now, a healthy gut microbial community can convert at least some methylmercury into elemental mercury, which is not very easily absorbed, but that's also dependent on having a healthy gut microbial community. And high levels of methylmercury cause damage to the central and peripheral nervous system, and it does this through binding with selenoenzymes. So selenoenzymes are, this important class of selenium-based enzymes whose main jobs are to prevent damage to the nervous system from oxidative stress. So they're antioxidant enzymes and they protect brain tissue. Well, methylmercury irreversibly binds to selenium and renders selenoenzymes inactive. And this causes damage to the brain because these selenoenzymes can't be doing their antioxidant function in the brain. Now, here's an important thing to keep in mind. Fish that are at the bottom of the food chain tend not to have very much mercury. So that includes all shellfish, salmon, trout, herring, haddock, pollock, sole, flounder, Atlantic mackerel, and lake whitefish. But here's another thing to consider. Because fish have selenoproteins, selenoenzymes in them, and methylmercury binds irreversibly to selenoproteins, if that mercury is already bound to selenium inside the fish, we can't absorb it, or even if we do absorb it, it can't bind to our selenoenzymes. So that mercury is moot. And it just so happens that nearly every variety of fish has more selenium in it than mercury, which means that A, The fish don't die from mercury, so that's good for them. But B, that mercury cannot cause problems in our body. As long as there's more selenium in the fish than mercury, that mercury is completely moot from a health perspective. Now, there have been a few studies that have looked at what's called the selenium health benefit value, which is the ratio of selenium to mercury in different types of fish, fished in different types of water. And really, almost all fish are perfectly safe to consume from a mercury perspective. The few exceptions are some of the top predators. So, for example, mako sharks. There's some studies that show that swordfish can have more mercury than selenium, depending on the waters that it's fished in. So there have been other studies showing it has more selenium than mercury. But certain sharks are really the top. And if you look at this table, you'll see almost all types of fish, and certainly the most common types of fish that you're going to be able to get in a grocery store are perfectly safe from a mercury perspective. Canned fish also perfectly safe, as is frozen seafood. So what about other pollutants? We hear a lot about dioxins and PCBs in fish, and why this is a reason why we shouldn't consume fish, because these are carcinogenic toxins, which they are. But actually, fish has far less of these than a lot of other foods, including beef and chicken and pork and dairy products and vegetables. So dioxins and PCBs, we want to minimize our exposure by getting organic versions and wild-caught versions and grass-fed, pasture-raised meats. But it's really not a good reason to avoid seafood. And actually, depending on the water where the fish is caught and where the fish lives, wild-caught fish is typically lower in dioxins and PCBs than farmed fish. So another good way to minimize exposure is to go for wild-caught. Another question is always about the radiation from Fukushima. And that, in that case, we're really looking at two radioactive isotopes of cesium as being the potential problems, cesium-134 and cesium-137. You know, when it comes to radiation, radiation's everywhere. In fact, all foods contain radioactive isotopes. And the amount of radiation that is put into the ocean that then gets into fish is extremely little. And when you compare to the natural radiation found in other foods, even fish that are, from the middle of the Pacific Ocean are perfectly safe. So for example, if you look at bluefin tuna, which is one of the fish that people have been more concerned about because of the biomagnification of these radioactive cesium isotopes, 7-ounce serving contains only 5% of the radioactive isotopes of one banana. So you're getting 20 times more radiation from eating a banana. And that doesn't mean don't eat bananas. That means fish is just fine. This is the natural radiation our bodies have the ability to detoxify. And the fact is that fish contains so many important vitamins and minerals that our detoxification systems need to be able to function normally. So we're really doing ourselves a favor by consuming more fish. In fact, if you consumed a 3/4 pound serving of bluefin tuna every day for an entire year, that would only be 12% of the radiation dose of one cross-continental flight from New York to LA. So the amount of radiation that's present in this fish is negligible. It's really having no effect on human health. And in every case, when we talk about potential pollutants, the benefits of consuming fish far outweigh the risks. And in fact, fish provides us with the nutrients that our bodies need to be able to detoxify our pollutant exposure from other sources. So where do we end up? We end up recommending at least 3 servings of fish a week, and this is really taken from trying to get those healthy omega-3 fats. So we're thinking oily fish like salmon and mackerel, shellfish once or twice a week, and sea vegetables 1 time a week. And this is really a bare minimum. There is no upper limit. Pescatarian autoimmune protocol diets are extremely healthy implementations of the autoimmune protocol. You could be eating seafood at every single meal. These are really amazing nutrient powerhouses and are very, very important to incorporate into the autoimmune protocol.